I've got one of my absolute favorite writers for as long as I've been around joining me on today's show to talk about the Nuggets and their first NBA Finals appearance. Howard Beck joins Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us, making us your first listen. Appreciate you guys being with us on whatever platform you choose, whether you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or seeing a version of the show on YouTube. Best way to support the show, just hit that like and subscribe button, turn on notifications, and we've got your daily live show here on Locked On Nuggets all through the NBA Finals featuring your Western Conference champions, the Denver Nuggets. Join me on today's show is Howard Beck. I'm extremely excited to have Howard Beck on. He has been one of my favorite writers since I began in this business. Before I started my career, I was reading Howard at the various places that he has worked. He's one of my absolute favorites. He knows about the history of this league. He understands how to contextualize these things. He is absolutely phenomenal. So glad to have him on board on today's show. We'll talk about the Nuggets and where they're at in these NBA Finals. We'll talk about his thoughts on that. We'll talk about the perception of the Nuggets nationally and some of the dynamics of all those things that are big talking points for Nuggets fans. We'll get to on today's show. Howard is a contributing writer for GQ, and you can find him across the Locked On Podcast Network because he is basically on all of the shows at this point. He is so far on those. He's contributed to the Locked On Network. We appreciate having Howard on. Howard, how are you today?
Matt, doing great. Great to see you. Great to talk to you. Appreciate the kind intro. And yes, I'm in definite danger of being highly overexposed across the Locked On Network. I hope people are listening just to their team shows and not to all of them, because there would be way too much of me in any given span right now. But shout out to David Locke and appreciate the whole crew.
Howard has written for Sports Illustrated, Bleacher Report, the New York Times, the LA Daily News, covered this league for a long time. When did you start covering the NBA?
1997 on the Laker beat, with the second year of the Shaq and Kobe era and through the bitter end, and it was a bitter end of the Shaq and Kobe era in 2004.
So you've seen some great Nuggets teams, and by that I mean two, like the 2009 team and then this one. First off, I just kind of want to get your reaction to everyone kind of has historical comps when we see these teams, and we want to always put them into a perspective that we can relate to. When you look at this Nuggets team and what they've accomplished and what they look like when you watch them play, are there any teams that the Nuggets remind you of in the midst of this run?
So not offhand, but I was kind of like banging it around my skull, trying to think like what are they an analog of, if anything? And I think, we try to make these comparisons, and some teams have a vague analog somewhere along the way historically. I don't know that they remind me of anyone specifically, but I came up with three different categories that I think they could fall into based on prior teams. To an extent, the 2000 Blazers, but only because Jokic reminds me of Arvydas Sabonis, but like even more dynamic and obviously, younger and sprier. I don't know that we would refer to either of them as spry in the traditional sense. But obviously it was an older Sabonis who came over, but I got to see Arvydas Sabonis doing amazing things for the Blazers back in the day. So the 2000 Blazers, and of course, epic battle against the Laker team that I was covering back then. So I thought about a little bit of that. Also because that was an incredibly well-balanced and deep team, that Blazers team, probably a more talented team overall than this Nuggets team, to be honest, just in terms of future Hall of Famers or guys with a lot more all-star accolades, that kind of thing. But I think there's a little bit of a vague similarity there. I don't know what you think of that one. Because they're an ensemble approach, granted, an ensemble around an absolutely elite talent in Jokic, it actually reminds me of, frankly, some recent teams. We are in a point here in the NBA where we have moved out of the super team era for the moment. I'm sure it will come back, but it's ensembles now. It wasn't a super team that won the championship with the Warriors last year. It was Steph plus a version of Clay that's no longer All-Star Clay, and a Draymond Green who, flirts with All-Star status, but is not at that level the same way as he was. That was an ensemble cast around Steph. Year before, it was an ensemble cast essentially around Giannis Antetokounmpo. So I think there's that comparison. And then I was thinking like Jokic as this selfless star who scores when he has to, but prefers to pass first, and has a lot of responsibility to set up all of his teammates. Who else does that remind me of? Oh, yeah, the team that they're about to face in the NBA Finals, the Miami Heat. Like I understand, like there's no other context in which anybody would just have made the comparison of Nikola Jokic to Jimmy Butler, but I'm doing it, Matt. I'm doing it. Like they're very different players, very different personalities, to say the least. But they are the hubs of their teams, and they're both kind of reluctant scorers. Why do we talk about playoff Jimmy? Why are we amazed that Jimmy Butler can like put up these incredible box scores in the postseason? Because he doesn't normally do it in the regular season. And it's like Seinfeld when he's doesn't want to be challenged to run the race. It's like, I choose not to run. Jimmy Butler, Nikola Jokic, because I choose not to score. Like they would prefer to be, because they also understand the responsibility they have. They would prefer to be the hub and the playmaker, the facilitator. So there you go. There's three awkward comparisons.
We've made the comparison on the show before, and it continues to feel very true to me. And like, I'm hesitant to bring it because of the weight that it comes with, which is the Spurs from the 2014 season. Like that's a team that had 4 championships already behind it, that had an already Hall of Famer, really honestly, 3, those guys were already Hall of Fame certified in Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, right? Kawhi's there wasn't the guy that he became even a year later with that squad. But the way that the Nuggets play, talked about that, the ensemble, and it's that collective, and the idea that you can take all these really great talents, but if everybody's willing to sacrifice and play together, it could be greater than the sum of its parts. And that really does feel to me how the Nuggets are. It's always so funny to me how we talk about players even year over year, where it's like KCP is going from like, yeah, I mean, he's fine. He's like a shooter. He could defend a little bit, to like championship level piece on the Lakers, back to like, yeah, no, he's like a guy, to like now back to like on a finals team, key contributor. The way these things evolve is really funny to me.
I thought that was an underrated trade at the time, and it's only grown more critical and more just visionary in some ways over time. Like they knew they needed obviously perimeter defenders. And it was funny because at the time there was this outline of, well, all right, well, Will Barton and Monty Morris for Ish Smith and KCP, and it was like they just kind of just are in these similar packages going back and forth, and it was like, no, they're trading away a Will Barton who is in decline, and I think some people were more aware of that than others. Obviously the Wizards weren't aware enough of that, I don't think. But it was just a really savvy move at the time. It was like a very low level, kind of in an off season where we're obsessing over where's Kevin Durant going if he gets traded, and the Jazz blowing things up, and like it just kind of was under the radar. But it was a really important move.
I want to ask you this before we take a break, which is, how has your view of Nikola Jokic shifted over this last 4 years? Like when we go back to say the bubble and who he was then, or even like before on that first run, where were you at on Jokic to begin with? And like, what are the things that have struck you most about his evolution to where he is now?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the broadest sense, he went from being really interesting and talented up and coming player who had, by that time, however far back we're going, he's made an all-star team or two. If you go back 4 or 5 years, right? He's just started to become kind of part of the mix, right? But there's a difference between being a guy who's going to be a perennial all-star and even a perennial all-NBA, or perennial all-NBA and perennial MVP candidate, or in his case, 2-time MVP and a one-time runner-up now. So the evolution, in terms of the way he's been recognized, I think is similar to the way most of us around the NBA have looked at him, which is you could see this at a certain point. You saw this coming. At a certain point, it was no longer he's just some second round curiosity. There was something emerging there and something special. And I'll never forget, probably even 5 years ago, talking to Tim Connolly and him making the statement, which he's made many, many times since then. I was not the only person he ever had this conversation with by far, but I remember 5-6 years ago, whatever it was, him saying, this guy's the best passer in the league. I don't mean a best passer for a center. I mean, he's the best passer in the league.
Wow.
And early on, that sounded a little bit more hyperbolic, and when he would say it, or when I would even repeat it, I would say it in ways of like, you're almost apologizing for it. But so when you ask about how we see him now versus then, now you don't have to qualify it, and you don't have to like soft pedal it. You could just say, you know what, this dude is one of the greatest passers in the history of the game, and almost certainly is the best passer in the NBA right now. It was great seeing LeBron, in defeat at the hands of a sweep, sit there and just, praise Jokic to the nth degree, basically saying like, it literally took his hat off. I'm taking my hat off, and literally took his hat off in the press conference. When a player of LeBron's accomplishments and stature and basketball intellect, and who is one of the great playmakers of all time himself, when he says that, like, that's when I think everybody else who maybe had been either holding out or just wasn't sure, or because they're casual fans, they just didn't really understand Jokic or know it. When LeBron says it like that, that's the signal to everybody else that if you haven't kind of figured it out yet, or gotten on board, or maybe you just hadn't seen him enough, now you know.
On the other side, I'll ask Howard about, how we talk about the Lakers and how we talk about the Nuggets, about their thoughts on that. We'll get to a couple of other things as well as we continue here on Locked On Nuggets. First, I need to tell you about eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. The next time that you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to my garage and look for the green check to know that the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets with Howard Beck, or as I like to call him, future Hall of Famer, Howard Beck. I think Howard needs to go in the Hall of Fame. That's just my opinion, based off his coverage of both the New York Times, the LA Daily News, covering those Shaq and Kobe teams, covering the debacle that is the New York Knicks for so long, but also the league news, covering the lockout in 11, Bleacher Report, so many great features. Howard is a legend in this business, and he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I'm going to go ahead and say that right now. But Howard, I will ask you this question, however, as somebody that covered the Lakers for the LA Daily News, as somebody that has seen Kobe's, second title run late in his career. First I'll ask you this. Like, I had a whole thing going into the series about, like, look, the basketball-wise, the Nuggets should win the series. The Nuggets are the better team. This is a 7 seed. The Nuggets have been better all year. They have home court. They're so good. But, like, I made a big deal about this. I was like, the Nuggets have never beaten the Lakers. Teams like the Nuggets in the NBA don't beat teams like the Lakers. A Lakers team with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Where were you at on the series going in, and were you surprised by the result?
Great question. I'll start with this. They were a 7th seed, but they were not the average 7th seed. Like, I would argue that if the Lakers had just made the moves that they made at the deadline that they should have made last summer, or in October, November, December, if they hadn't waited so long, if they had started with that team, they're not finishing 7th, for one. Even if Anthony Davis and LeBron James still missed the games that they missed, it's a better balanced, more logical group. So I think they could have been a top 4 seed, and maybe they were meeting Denver in the second round as the winner of the 4-5, or maybe they're meeting in the conference finals anyway, but as the 2 or 3 seed, not as the 7 seed, and we would perceive them differently. So there's that, for what it's worth. They were not the average 7 seed. They get swept like an average 7 seed. So there's that. Yeah. But I certainly did not expect a sweep. I thought the series, it was going the distance, honestly. I thought this was going in before they'd played a game. I thought, this looks like a 6 or 7 game series. Yes, I am still, like a lot of people, probably a little bit captive of the aura of LeBron and Anthony Davis, and maybe of whatever you want to say about Laker mystique. I don't think it's so much about the Lakers. It's more about who they have, right? And, these guys are 3 years removed from a championship. LeBron is 38 and in year 20, but he also just had one of the greatest seasons we've ever seen for a guy of that level of just tenure in the league. So, and because they had looked pretty potent over the last 2 months, regular season and postseason, I thought there was another gear there still. I wasn't sure what LeBron could do, considering that he has a foot that might actually require offseason surgery. I think we all keep forgetting that. or have along the way. Certainly, in that elimination game, I mean, in the first half looked like, all right, there it is. Like the guy can still summon like the absolute greatest. And geez, like, he was, could have gone for 60 something. He ran out of gas, and that's probably the more reasonable thing to expect of a guy with his age and miles. So yes, I was dramatically wrong on length of series. I thought the Lakers could win this series. And look, at the end of the day, and this is easier to say after the fact, but yeah, the Nuggets are younger, sprier, deeper, and something that I always say is really, really important. And I talked about this in relation to the Lakers going into the playoffs. I talked about this in relation to the Suns going into the playoffs. Continuity matters, time together, chemistry, all this stuff that we talk about that sounds so squishy and like, oh, there's no data to back that up and whatever. And you guys are you writers are, getting caught up in your narratives. No, like chemistry matters, continuity matters. Having that time together matters. The core of the Nuggets, from front office, even though Tim Connelly left, Calvin Booth is still there and is the carryover from front office down to Coach Michael Malone, down to Jokic, Porter, Murray. Like the core of that group has been together. Even if we go back to when they met in the bubble, both teams have changed dramatically, but the Lakers much more so. And the Lakers changed over their entire roster like 3 times in the last 3 years. The Nuggets had a group that you should expect, with the familiarity they have and the chemistry that creates, the knowledge of each other that creates. Yeah, you should expect them to perform with a higher level of precision and trust in each other. And I think what impressed me most in this series, in the conference finals, but also in these playoffs to date, if there were 2 caveats or sources of skepticism that I would have about the Nuggets, and not just me, I think people around the league, if they were still holdouts on, all right, the Nuggets won the West in the regular season, but can they win it and go to the finals? The skepticism would have come down to a couple different things. One is obviously defense. And I think they've shown they have a level of defense now that we didn't really expect, and that they had not proven. So it's fair to wonder until they do it, until they show it. The way the game ends with like Jamal Murray and KCP, who was the second
Aaron
person?
Gordon.
Was it? Oh, it was Aaron Gordon. Excuse me. And Aaron Gordon combining to snuff out LeBron's last-ditch effort. Symbolically, I just thought was really cool in so many ways. But so the defense was one potential knock, and the other one was, all right, granted, we're in an era where it's kind of been ensembles winning titles or ensembles getting to the finals, but do they really have a second star on the nights that Jokic needs somebody else to lean on? And Jamal Murray has kind of reemerged in a way, not always, but much closer to what we'd seen a few years ago. I know he doesn't like Bubble Jamal, but like that guy, after the injury, getting back to that level, we've seen some of that. So those are the 2 things you could have flagged as, I'm not sure because of these factors. And I think they've kind of put those away. And I think they go into the finals, frankly, as the favorite.
On the other side, I want to ask Howard about Melo's retirement, about his view of Carmelo from his time in New York, as well as we'll get to one more question about the way that certain outlets talk about the Nuggets and talk about other teams. We'll do that on the other side when we return on Locked On Nuggets. Final segment here with Howard Beck. Thanks for joining us. My thanks to Howard for joining me today on this show. Appreciate having him giving his time. Howard, as we kind of wrap up the conversation on this Nuggets team and going forward, Michael Malone reasserted over and over and over again, and hearing different people have different feelings about it, about why he did that. The idea of motivating his team to make it feel like a number 1 seed, was an underdog. Like nobody believes in us. That's always such a powerful mentality in athletes. My co-host Adam Mares believes that some of it was him being pretty petulantly outraged at the idea that he got out-coached in a game where he won, which is what all anyone was saying about the series after game 1. Oh, the Lakers made the comeback. Watch out. And all these types of things. I've listened to these podcasts and like Howard, I've been at these finals for 10 years, 13 years now. And like, these are all people that I know and respect and have followed their work. At the same time, like even today, the podcasts are starting out and it's Okay, so let's talk about what went wrong for the Lakers. And like LeBron's retirement thing is definitely possible, like part of it. And it's always like, and you know, you gotta give credit to the Nuggets too. So anyway with the Lakers, and you know, I understand as somebody that covers this team and you know have this connection to the fans. I understand Nuggets fans' frustrations over this, and I just kind of want to get your thoughts on. Do you think it's just one of those things where it's like, look, the Lakers drive money. If the Nuggets drove as much money, they would get talked about as much. Is it a product of just the success? Is it where do you think that the imbalance of how we cover these things comes from? Do you think it needs to be shifted, or is it just a reality that fans are going to have to live with?
Man, Matt, we could do 3 hours on this alone. Right. I could go all Richard Deitch, Brian Curtis. Yeah. Listen, there's a lot there. So I'm gonna bounce around a little bit on this. I wrote a foreword for a Lakers book on their 75 years. It was a compilation of like a bunch of Sports Illustrated features from over the decades. And I wrote a foreword for it. And in the foreword, the thing that I kind of flagged as being hallmarks of the Lakers historically and all the way through to the present, they are always about like celebrities and drama, right? They're about superstars and drama. They always have stars, almost always. They always have drama, good drama, bad drama, you know, whatever, championship drama, what misery and drama. They just do it. Drama is part of sports. It's part of why we watch. Right now, there's the drama that happens on the court or on the field, and that's why we love the games. But in the NBA in particular, we know this probably more so than the NFL or baseball, other sports, the drama of free agency and trades and petty fights and snubs. And like, this is what we do. We talk about all year. We can't then turn around and resent it when we're all part of it. And by the way, that's Nuggets fans too. Like every Nuggets fan who's listening to this, if you have ever been mad about a snub, or if you ever like clicked the second you saw, you know, what did LeBron say about Jimmy Butler last night? Like all that, because we're also in this age of social media and aggregation and a lot of clickbait. That stuff exists because we all freaking click it. If we all stopped clicking it, if we all stopped tuning into those shows and those podcasts and the scream fests, it would cease, but we're not going to. So they're going to keep going. And I'm part of that too, on some level. We are all part of that ecosystem. And I'm not going to say it's a healthy ecosystem. I'm not about to make that case. But having been a podcast host, a podcast co-host, having done a lot of NBA radio as a part-timer there over the years, I get it. Like there are certain topics and certain names we are going to always come back to because of the level of interest. There's a fine line between feeding the interest and the demand versus pandering versus hyperbolizing, if I can create that word, whatever it may be. Like, but you kind of have to do a certain amount of it. In my writing, I've always tried to be more balanced, right? I don't want to write about LeBron every day of the week. I don't want to write about just the Lakers or wherever LeBron happened to be over the last 20 years. I don't want to just focus on that. I want to have a more diverse portfolio of what I'm doing because I'd get bored. I even got bored at times covering Shaq and Kobe for 7 years, if you can believe that. Because after a while, it's like, all right, here we go again. Right. Either here we go again because they're winning a lot, or here we go again, they're fighting a lot. Probably both. And I, look, every smaller market, right? So in my years covering the Lakers, one of the things that I noticed over time, so they had these various rivalries with the Spurs, the Kings, the Trailblazers, and in every case, there was always in the media of those towns, and I don't mean to say it's the other reporters, but columnists or TV, radio, the fans themselves, there was always that same provincial feeling of, oh, the big market bullies, the Hollywood guys. There's always this resentment, and I'm sure the Nuggets fans have been feeling that same level in this most recent series against the Lakers. Yeah, it's kind of how it goes. Yes, I think that is kind of implicit to every small market in this league. It's kind of what makes it fun on some level. I don't mind it, and I'm never going to tell fans how they should feel. I think Michael Malone. I love Michael Malone. I've known him since I first got to New York in 2004. He was one of the assistant coaches for the Knicks then. Great guy, great coach, and I'm thrilled for him. I'm thrilled for a lot of people in that organization. There's a lot of really great people in the Nuggets organization, and so but the disrespect card is getting a little bit much. Like, Jokic did win back-to-back MVP and then finish as a runner-up, which is, by the way, runner-up to MVP, not an insult.
Right.
If you wanted him to win 3 straight, great, fine. You want to make the case for it, fine. I don't mind it. But like, Nikola Jokic has not been overlooked or disrespected.
Sure.
Have the Nuggets been on TV as much as is warranted? Probably not. You could complain to the networks on that one. Have they gotten as much acclaim as they should get? Probably not. Did I understand where Malone was coming from when he was kind of, he was seriously irked by, we won a game, but they're all talking about this adjustment that they think is suddenly tilting the series. Like, I totally get that part. And it was a very Michael Malone thing to be like, calling it out. Like all of that's fine. The funny part here is now they're going to go into the finals, almost certainly against the Heat, who themselves have been playing the disrespect card. And in the Heat's case, it's completely disingenuous because Miami had the best record in the East a year ago, tumble all the way to the 7th best record, lose a play-in game, fall to 8th seed, and now you're mad at us for underestimating you? You just spent an entire calendar year underachieving, and now you expect we bought into what you showed us. Oh, sorry that we judged you based on your record. And so they're playing the disrespect card to the nth degree. And now we get the disrespect Olympics in the finals, and the Heat have already won because I'm going to say, I don't know. You know the odds better than I do. I don't pay attention to this stuff. The Nuggets are, I think, going to be heavy favorites as both the higher seed, the home court, the bigger player, the 2-time MVP. Like, they're going to go in as favorites. Now the Heat get to say, and still nobody believes in us.
Yeah.
So they win the disrespect Olympics. The Nuggets probably win the title.
We'll get to there in a second. So I think what you're saying is true. I think part of this too is if you notice across our culture, there's a hyper, like, I'm a fan of the term like efficiency. I think efficiency is important, both in basketball, life, etc. But, and this is like a very meta thing, when we operate in a capitalist society, it's always going to be gearing more and more and more and more. Like, it's never enough.
Yes.
And so if the most efficient pathway for a media companies to be successful is to focus only on the most successful and popular thing, that's what they'll do. If the most successful path, if the most effective tactic available was to cover all 30 teams equally and distribute all that, the way that honestly the NFL does, the NBA would do that, and its partners would do that.
Yeah,
is that there's a drive towards efficiency and attention on top of everything else.
This goes to my "we're all at fault" premise, right? Yeah. We are all at fault. You, the fans, are at fault. You, the listeners, right now are at fault because all of you collectively are responding to the stimulus, right? And so that's the thing. And by the way, just a quick defense of the Nuggets win their first. The Nuggets go to the finals for the first time in their history, but everybody's going to talk about LeBron's potential retirement or what are the Lakers going to do to get back and how did they get swept? LeBron has been the most important player in the league for the last 20 years, with all due respect to Steph Curry and Kevin Durant and others. What he does matters a lot to everybody, to the economy and ecosystem of the NBA, to what we all talk about. It's not unfair or unreasonable. We do need perspective, and I do think we need a balance. And probably, again, I don't watch the Screamfest shows. I see the clips on social media, but I don't know what they were yelling about today or how much they were, if it was 99% Lakers and 1% Nuggets. I have no idea what they said today. But my guess is it was probably over-indexed toward the Lakers. But how can it not be on some level? I would look again, I would like a little bit more balance, and I think the Nuggets deserve all the credit in the world. I think they should get their due, and I hope that those shows were at least discussing in some respect what the Nuggets did, how they did it, why it's so impressive. But of course, we have to talk about the fact that LeBron has thrown out there the possibility, as much as none of us believe it, of him retiring. And of course, we have to talk about what Rob Pelinka needs to do next to fortify around him on the premise that LeBron is back next season. Of course, not just because it's the Lakers. It would be wherever LeBron is right now. If LeBron had still been in Cleveland, we would be having these same discussions. It's not even just like a big market thing or a Laker mystique thing or a Lakers. It's wherever LeBron is. The fact that it's LeBron and he happens to be part of the Lakers, a team that we also probably over discuss, just makes it that much bigger. But again, I'm not going to tell fans how they should think or how they should feel. I do think that it is healthier to try to just make peace with the fact that these things all have to coexist.
For me on that end, I hold a little bit of like, I hold LeBron a little bit responsible for it, where I'm like, and he knows. I'm like, and I know, like, and I know that the minute you say this, you're now the conversation.
He held it to the end. Matt, he held it to the end. I was watching that press conference live last night, very late at night here in New York, still watching it. And I wanted us to see how this would unfold. And there were like 2 or 3 questions along the way of the 12 that were asked to him where it was about next season. And at no point, but it was about the roster. So he kept saying, I don't know what the roster is going to look like. We have all these free agents, blah, blah, blah. He, at no point during that did he say, I don't even know if I'll be here. He waited until they said last question. And the last question was not specifically about, it was not, I can't remember what the question was, but it was not going to specifically lead him down this road. He was waiting to have his last answer be, somebody could have asked, what are you guys ordering for dinner when you get home? And he would have found a way to segue to, I don't know if I'll be back.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
He was waiting for that. He knew exactly what he was doing.
Before I get you out of here, I want to ask you, you covered Melo in New York when he was in New York, didn't really cover the Knicks specifically then. You were a national writer, but you were in New York at the same time as Melo. You covered the league for the duration of his career. With him calling it a career, it was cool to see him, like the Nuggets acknowledged him on social media yesterday, and he acknowledged them back. That's like a nice first step towards maybe a reconciliation and being able to recognize him at games. Adam and I covered kind of like the Nuggets fan perspective on this previously, but just want to kind of get your perspective on Melo's career. Going to be a Hall of Famer, no doubt about that, based off of the international success alone, and then winning a college championship. But just kind of want to get your sense of his NBA career and what you're going to remember about Carmelo Anthony.
Yeah. So I was still covering the Knicks for the New York Times when he got traded. So I had pieces of a couple seasons, right? Because he gets traded mid-season. And then I covered the following season was a lockout shortened season, the 66 game season.
Midnight Pizza.
Yeah. And then the next season was I'd been reassigned, sounds like a pejorative. I moved over to the Nets beat. My editors at the Times had said, hey, you've been on the Knicks for 8 years. The Nets are now in Brooklyn, your backyard. Do you want a change of scenery? And also, by the way, we think it's really cool that Brooklyn has a team for the first time since the Dodgers left. I'm like, yeah, that'll be fun. Let's something new. So I did that. And so I spent like 3-4 months covering the Nets until it got like the novelty wore off and the Times sent me back to the Knicks beat. So I finished off. So I got like 3 partial seasons of Carmelo up close. He's great with the media, great guy, and great player, great scorer, of course. I was always one who was a little bit of more of a Carmelo skeptic from the moment he arrived. Didn't think he should have forced the trade. Thought he should have waited for free agency. He cost himself and the Knicks a lot because they just didn't have enough talent around him. They sent out so many assets. It was really hard for them to rebuild. He admitted that at one point, years later. So there was that aspect. And look, like, this always sounds harsh, especially when a guy is just retired and we're all writing tributes and speaking so highly of a guy who we know is going to the Hall of Fame, who was one of the greatest scorers of all time, top 10 scorer of all time. And a guy who, by the way, like when Kobe Bryant himself, I'll never forget Kobe Bryant sitting there in the press room at Madison Square Garden. One of the last times he and Melo had gone against each other while Melo was still in New York, and Kobe kind of like pushing back on Knicks fans and or New York media who might have been critical, saying he's a bad man. He's a bad man. And like, I remember Kobe saying this, like when Kobe and other all-time greats are the ones trying to remind you how good this guy is, how great this guy is, you have to listen. That said, he was a great scorer who wasn't the most efficient scorer, right? He played a style that, especially as basketball evolved, became less and less favored because it was bully ball. It was isolation. It was, a lot of pump fakes and then go to the basket. It was not ball movement. It was not pretty all the time. He was really great at what he did. I thought if there, the critique of his career would be, aside from adding a 3-point shot over the course of his career, and he became a much better 3-point shooter, he never became more of a passer or playmaker. He never became a better defender. There were plenty of times in his career when you could knock him for not being in prime condition. None of that's unfair. Like those are just facts about his career that various people, teammates as well as coaches, had flagged over the years. I never understood his demand to leave Denver in the first place. They had just been to the conference finals the year before. And I didn't understand it other than just wanting to be in New York for the market, which is fine. Like, again, like that's fair. But on a basketball basis, the Nuggets had a proven track record. And by the way, as we learned later and have learned many times since, he was with a phenomenal front office with one of the smartest GMs in the NBA, Masai Ujiri.
Yeah.
And I do wonder in the alternate timeline if Carmelo had just cooled his heels and stayed, what Masai could have done to build around him. And so and by forcing his way to New York, like I say, he cost them a lot of assets and a lot of players. They never could quite get a team around him. And also he was not somebody who was that easy to play with. His two best seasons probably are the conference finals run in Denver, where he's got Chauncey Billups, and the 54-win season with the Knicks, the only year that he delivered a playoff series victory in New York, which is incredible to think still. In 7 years in New York, 3 playoff appearances, 1 playoff series win, 4 trips to the lottery. And in that year that they won 54 and went to the second round, he had Jason Kidd. And having a strong-willed, dominant presence of a point guard, Chauncey, Jason Kidd, great leaders, great playmakers who could keep the offense humming, hold Carmelo accountable, make sure other guys got involved. It's not coincidence that those were his 2 most successful seasons in terms of playoff success. And those are, that's bounced around a little bit there, but that's my general perspective on it. Like for sure, an all-time great player, for sure a Hall of Famer. But he is in that category of Hall of Famers who we go, man, that guy was amazing. But if he had just done X, Y, Z, that's it's fair. It feels mean-spirited at times, especially in the wake of a retirement where we're supposed to just lavish him with praise. But I'm always going to feel like, he could have done a little bit more. And frankly, like when things were going badly with the Knicks, he had opportunities to leave.
Yeah.
But he kept choosing the higher paycheck, which again, his prerogative. But he could have gone to Chicago and played with Derrick Rose and Joakim Noah. Like there were moments where he could have steered his career in a different way and to have more success. But listen, the guy's phenomenally successful on 1,000 other levels. And, I'm happy for him that he's getting to move into this next phase of his life and career and curious to see where it goes.
Yeah. I mean, I think a good way to put it is great player. They can't all be Jokic. That's one way to put it. So, that's Howard Beck. You can follow him on Twitter at Howard Beck and catch his work. He's a contributor writer for GQ. And you can find him all across the Locked On Network. Howard, thanks for coming on. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode, possibly starting our finals preview. We'll see how that goes. If you haven't gotten enough of this yet, I think we're at like 5 shows already this week, but we got lots more coming for you. Make sure to follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Nuggets. Leave the 5-star reviews. We'll see you guys again next time. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Nuggets.